cases will creep into your brain and never leave. Today, 1/3 of all murders in the United States go unsolved. And it's murder cases like these that haunt us with the thought that the killer was never caught and could still be walking among us. Throughout history, in fact, there's been no shortage of unsolved murder cases that are as creepy as they are baffling. Our first case, the boy in the box. On February 23rd of 1957, a man was checking his muskrat traps in the woods off of Susquehannon Road in Fox Chase, Philadelphia. If any of you are in Philly and I butchered that name, my sincerest apologies. When he came upon a baby bassinet box with a dead body in it. Knowing that his muskrat traps were illegal, the man decided against reporting the body. 2 days later, a college student named Frederick Benosis was spying on girls at the Good Shepherd School when he too came upon the body. Benosis was also reluctant to notify the police, but a day later, he nonetheless reached out to authorities. The body was that of a young child who has since become known as the boy in the box, as well as America's unknown child. The boy was completely naked, and his hands and feet were wrinkled as if he had been submerged into water before he died. Furthermore, his esophagus contained a dark substance, suggesting that he might have vomited shortly before he died, the cause of which appeared to be several blows to the head. Surprisingly, even though the case attracted significant media attention, no one ever came forward to identify the boy. However, progress was made in 2002 when a psychiatrist contacted the authorities with information regarding the case. The psychiatrist claimed that a patient of hers, a woman named Mary, confided that her parents had bought America's unknown child and used him as a sex toy. According to Mary, her mother had been bathing the boy when he suddenly threw up. Angered, Mary's mother beat him to death. Mary claimed that she accompanied her mother to northeast Philadelphia woods, where they wrapped the boy in a blanket, placed him in a box, and left him there. The investigators were convinced that Mary was telling the truth, even if she was mentally unstable. However, when Mary's name leaked to the press, she left the country, and no further efforts have been made to investigate the curious case of America's unknown child. Case 2, the Black Dahlia. On January 15th of 1947, the dismembered body of a woman was discovered in a vacant lot in Leimert Park, Los Angeles. So surreal was the scene that the woman who discovered the body, Betty Bersinger, initially thought that she had come upon a severed mannequin. The body was completely drained of blood and had seemingly been washed, and the face had been slashed from mouth who had been dating a married salesman. 6 days after the gruesome discovery, on January 21st, the editor of the Los Angeles Examiner, James Richardson, received an anonymous call. The caller told Richardson to expect souvenirs. On January 24th, a curious envelope was discovered by a U.S. Postal Service worker. The envelope was addressed to the Los Angeles Examiner and other Los Angeles papers. The letter contained Short's birth certificate, photos, and other personal belongings. On January 26th, another letter came, and it read, "Here it is. Turning in Wednesday, January 29th, 10 a.m. Had my fun at the police. Black Dahlia Avenger." The note included the location where the killer would supposedly show up. The police waited patiently, but to their dismay, the killer never showed. That same day, another note was sent. "Have changed my mind. You would not give me a square deal. Dahlia killing was justified." Over the years, the police have questioned countless suspects and self-confessed Black Dahlia killers, including one promising lead in the form of George Hodel. However, to this day, the Black Dahlia's murderer has not been found and remains one of the most baffling unsolved murder cases in history. Case number 3, the Icebox Murders. On June 23rd, 1965, Houston patrolmen paid a standard visit to the house of an elderly couple, Fred and Edwina Rogers. To their surprise, they found the house empty and were probably on their way out when one of them decided to check the refrigerator. My God, it's been a long day. Charles Bulock, one of the patrolmen present that day, recalled the scene. Opened up a refrigerator and seen nothing but meat stacked in it. My partner standing next to me made the comment that it looked like somebody had butchered a hog. We didn't know it was a body until we got ready to close the refrigerator and we could see the head down in the bottom of the vegetable bin. Police investigated and discovered that Fred, 81 years old, and Edwina, 72, had actually been killed a week before they were placed in the refrigerator. Edwina had been brutally beaten and then shot, while Fred had had his head crushed. His insides were later flushed down the toilet. The killer was never found, but the prime suspect was, and still is, the elderly couple's son, Charles, who was 43 years old at the time. No one could ever find. He disappeared without a trace. However, recently, 2 Houstonians, Hugh and Martha Gardner, have declared that they have cracked the Icebox murder case wide open. According to the Gardners, Charles, who was a geophysicist, was physically and emotionally emotionally abused by his parents from a young age. His parents lived in the house that was owned by Charles and constantly took out loans in his name. Tired of being constantly abused, Charles supposedly killed them. It's believed that he then fled to Mexico, soon made his way down to South America, where he continued working as a geophysicist. Case 4. The Mystery of Room 1046. On January 2nd, 1935, a man checked into room 1046 at the Hotel President in Kansas City. His name, according to the hotel register, was Roland T. Owen, and his home address was in Los Angeles. He had a cauliflower ear, brown hair, and a horizontal scar on his scalp. He had no luggage except for a hairbrush, a comb, and toothpaste. That same day that Owen checked in at the hotel, a maid stopped by room 1046. According to her, Owen seemed frightened. The blinds were shut tight, and the room's only source of light came from a small lamp. After the maid was done cleaning the room, Owen asked her to leave the door unlocked because he was expecting a friend. Later, when the maid returned with fresh towels, she saw a note on the dresser that said, "Dawn, I will be back in 15 minutes. Wait." The next morning, the maid returned to room 1046. It was locked from the outside, so she assumed that Owen had gone out. However, to her surprise, Owen was in the room, meaning that someone else had stopped by previously and locked Owen in. Just like the previous night, Owen was sitting in the dark. Then the phone rang. Owen answered and said, "No, Dawn, I don't want to eat. I am not hungry. I just had breakfast." That same day, a motorist named Robert Lane picked up a man near the Hotel President. The man apparently told Lane that he was going to kill someone tomorrow. Later on, Lane identified the stranger he had picked up as Owen. That night, when the maid returned to room 1046 with fresh towels, she was turned away by a gruff-sounding man. The next morning, the hotel staff noticed that the telephone in room 1046 was off the hook. A bellboy was sent up to the room where he discovered Owen lying in a puddle of blood. It was obvious that Owen had been tortured. When the police asked Owen who did this to him, he answered, "Nobody." His wounds, according to him, were the result of him falling against the bathtub. Mysteriously, his clothing was missing. When the police tried to confirm Owen's identity, they found that Ronald T. Owen did not exist. Owen, who had by now become John Doe, died in the hospital and was to be buried in the potter's field. However, an anonymous call came asking for the burial to be postponed until funds for a proper funeral were wired. 13 flowers were sent for the funeral and were signed wasn't able to progress any further. Police never found the mysterious Dawn, and they could never trace the mysterious woman named Louise who funded the funeral and sent the flowers. Case number 5, the Hall Mills murder case. On September 16th of 1922, two teenage lovers were out on a stroll when they discovered the bodies of a man and a woman lying under a crabapple tree. Both the man and the woman were dead. The man was shot once, the woman shot 3 times. The bodies had been posed. Both the man's and the woman's feet were pointing towards the apple tree. The man's hand was on the woman's neck and hers on his knee. The man's card was propped against his foot. A hat concealed the man's head, and a scarf was wrapped around the woman's neck. It was later discovered that the woman's tongue had been cut out. Torn love letters were scattered all around them. The bodies were those of Reverend Edward Wheeler Hall and Eleanor Mills. The two had been lovers, but their affair was a complicated one. Mills was married to the church's janitor, and Hall was married to a wealthy woman named Frances Stevens Hall, the main murder suspect. The crime scene was contaminated by souvenir hunters, and thus the police had nothing solid to go on until Jane Gibson, better known as the Pig Woman, came forward. She was a hog farmer who lived near the crime scene. According to her, on the night of September 14th, she saw 4 people, 2 men and 2 women, in her cornfield. Gibson heard a woman yell, "Explain these letters." Gunshots, and then a woman shrieking the name Henry. The case was dismissed and no one was charged. But then, 4 years later, a maid that had previously served the Halls confessed that the Reverend wanted to annul his marriage and elope with Mills. The Pig Woman was once again called in to testify, but her testimony was deemed inaccurate. It didn't help that Gibson's mother, who sat in the front row, kept mumbling, "Liar, liar," throughout the testimony, thus further ruining Gibson's credibility. Mrs. Hall and her brothers, Henry and William, were acquitted. And our final case, case number 6, Charles Morgan and Green Eyes. Prominent Tucson escrow agent Charles Chuck Morgan left his house as usual on March 22nd of 1977, but did not return for 3 days. When he did return, he could not speak, as he explained to his bewildered wife. His throat was painted with a hallucinogenic drug that could kill him or make him go mad. He also confessed to being a U.S. Treasury agent. It took Morgan a week to recover, was discovered in the desert. He had been shot in the back of the head. The murder weapon, his own gun. According to the sheriff's department, Morgan's death was suicide. Please tell me how that man shot himself in the back of the head. Anyway, but if it was indeed suicide, why did Morgan wear a bulletproof vest? And why did he carry a knife and a holster in his belt? To complicate matters further still, some strange objects were found in Morgan's car, parked near the crime scene. The curious objects included ammunition, weapons, a CB radio, and one of Morgan's teeth wrapped in a handkerchief. A $2 bill was also found clipped to Morgan's underwear. The bill had a number of Spanish surnames scribbled on it, as well as a map of the area. 2 days after Morgan's body was discovered, an anonymous woman called the Pima County Sheriff's Department. She referred to herself as Green Eyes and confessed that she was the anonymous woman who had called Morgan's wife previously. She said that before Morgan's death, she had met him in a motel where he had shown her a suitcase full of cash. There was supposedly a contract out on Morgan's life, but he and the hitman had arranged a deal for his life to be saved. No suspects were ever found, but it is believed that the mafia was involved as Morgan supposedly carried out escrow work for the mafia and had recently testified in a secret investigation into illegal activity. Nevertheless, Morgan's killing remains one of the most baffling unsolved murder cases in American history. Not to say that he couldn't have physically shot himself in the back of the head, but typically, if people are going to do that to themselves, they wouldn't choose that area. All of the cases are baffling and unsolved, but we have to also look at the time that these crimes occurred and our ability to investigate and use DNA wasn't really, it wasn't being used at those times. So I'm sure that had a lot to do with it, and it was easier for people to disappear if they committed a crime. But the boy in the box was a really disturbing case. I just thought that was so incredibly sad, and that no one ever, came forward to claim that little boy. And the Black Dahlia murder, there's so much that goes into that. There could be a whole video done on that. Also a very, very interesting case. Excuse me, good lord. Sorry guys, I don't know about tonight. So, those were our 6 cases. I appreciate everyone joining me this evening. Sorry this is kind of a short one, but I'll hopefully have a couple more videos out this week. The highest compliment you can pay to the channel is a thumbs up or subscribe. I would greatly appreciate